Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Culture Report. My name is Antonia Velez. If you didn't already know, March is Women's History Month, a time dedicated to highlight women of all backgrounds and their contributions. So this episode is going to focus on just that, badass women and how their place has transformed in different spheres of society, like sports, the arts, and the workforce. Let's start with that. Throughout the years, huge strides have been made for working women, but there's still a lot of work to do, no pun intended. Women's participation in the U.S. labor force has grown significantly. Women make up 47% of the labor force, but that labor force participation spike has plateaued. Plus, despite outnumbering men in the college-educated workforce pool, women are still getting paid less. Women earn 16 cents per dollar less than men, and trans women earn 60 cents for every dollar paid to a typical U.S. worker. For Black, Hispanic, and Native American women employed full-time, median annual earnings are less than those of white women, as well as their male counterparts. Additionally, numbers show that after a drop in labor force during the pandemic, men have returned to work at a higher rate than women. The leading factor of a lower participation in the labor force for women, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce says it's taking care of the home and family. Now, I'll let you decide if traditional gender roles have anything to do with that. And when it comes to leadership positions, be they in business or government, women still have not caught up to men. And although the very idea of what a woman's job can be has vastly widened, they are still underrepresented in many fields. I sat down with 3 women who work in the beer, aviation, and firefighting industries, all male-dominated, to talk about their experiences and how they're impacting their fields for generations of women to come. All right, so everyone here today has 2 things in common. We're all women with A names, which I love, and we're also women working in male-dominated industries. I don't want to do the introductions for you. I want you all to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do and why you got into this industry despite it being a male-dominated industry. Whoever wants to start can go.
Go for it.
I'll go first. My name is Alyssa Hober. I have been a craft beer brewer for the past almost 10 years and recently just opened my own craft brewery in downtown Denver.
That's awesome. Yeah. And how'd you get into the industry? Tell us a little bit about that.
Got into the industry, started like a lot of craft brewers do, as home brewing. Moved to Colorado from Texas about 11 years ago, just picked up the hobby randomly because it was such a big thing here and realized that I was really good at it and that it was I really enjoyed it too. Was really passionate about it. I was at the time going to school to be a nurse, but decided I wanted to do something a little less stressful and something that I really enjoyed. And went to Regis University for their craft beer program and just been doing it professionally ever since.
That's so baller. I love that. What about you?
So I'm Adriana. My stepdad is actually the reason that I became a pilot. He was a pilot for United, actually. Wow. And I remember I was 15 and he gave me a Discovery flight for Christmas, it's 30 minutes in a tiny little 4-seater airplane. We took off, and I knew from that moment that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And he was the one truly that encouraged me and helped me get started. He was my first instructor. And then, I was 17 when I got my first license, my private pilot's license, and then I went to Purdue University, did the rest of my licenses, got my bachelor's, got my master's, became an instructor, and so I instructed for a little bit, and then got my first commercial airline job, eventually built up all my flight time so that I could get here to United Airlines. So now I'm a captain at United, flying the 737 out of Denver. I'm also on the pilot hiring team, so I'm also recruiting, hopefully more women like me.
That's awesome.
To help, to increase diversity at United.
Absolutely, and you're the youngest, correct me if I'm wrong, you're the youngest captain at United.
The youngest female captain.
Right.
Yeah, so there are men who are 23, I think, 23, 24, that did upgrade, but I was 27 when I upgraded to captain, and I'm pretty sure I'm still the youngest female captain, or I was the youngest when I first upgraded.
Congratulations,
yeah.
That's
Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks for sharing. And what about you, Anya?
I'm Anya. I'm a firefighter paramedic at West Metro Fire Rescue out in Lakewood. I've been in the fire service for about 4 years now. I got into it because I knew somebody who was a firefighter, and I remember looking at his job. This was like straight out of college. Mm-hmm. and thinking that is so cool, and just asking him all the time what he was doing and what kind of calls he was running. And I never thought that I could do this job because I didn't ever see myself as particularly fit or brave or strong. And I kind of got to the point of like, okay, like I'm gonna try it. And if I try it, then at least I'll know one way or another. So I went and did a ride along with a volunteer agency out east, and it was like, this is the coolest thing ever. So I went back to EMT school, got my EMT, went through a couple of fire academies to end up where I'm at now, and then I just graduated paramedic school a month ago.
Wow,
Brand new
congratulations.
paramedic.
That's awesome. I think that what you said there is really important, and I want to talk about that because being a woman who's working in a male-dominated field often comes with like consequences, be they external, like stereotypes or biases, or internal, like imposter syndrome, what have you. So I know I certainly have dealt with that. Does anyone have any experiences with that they'd like to highlight?
I mean, I think with the struggles with my career is that it's, especially when I got into it 10 years ago, there were maybe 3 or 4 other female brewers in the state or in Denver in general. It's very unheard of. It's a very hard, like physical labor job.
Right.
And so me trying to, once I graduated, trying to get in, there were so many interviews that I had that they just like I could tell took one look at me and thought that I couldn't do the job or that I wasn't fit for that kind of work. So it was a really hard struggle to try to convince people that like, no, I do brew. I am, a small person, but I can lift heavy things and I can make really good beer.
Absolutely, I'm sure you do. I gotta try it.
Yeah. For me, I mean, unfortunately, it does happen quite often. Coming from passengers sometimes or customer service agents still, sometimes I get confused for a flight attendant quite frequently. Probably at least once a trip. And then I'll fly with another pilot, and they don't necessarily realize how often it happens until they experience it themselves and see that they call them the captain instead of me, even though we're standing right next to each other, and they can see how many stripes I have, right? Because captains have 4 stripes and first officers have 3 stripes. And so when that happens, I mean, at a certain point, you can't let it get to you, because you know what you're good at. Mm-hmm. You know what your capabilities are. You know what your accomplishments are. And so at a certain point, it's like, yeah, I know that I can do this. Whatever anyone else thinks, it kind of doesn't matter, because you know that you're going to, for me at least, I know that I can keep everyone in the back safe. I know that I'm going to be able to get us from point A to point B safely because I've done the training. I know what I know. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do, right? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely run into some of the same things too, especially like just last week I had my gear sitting in my garage because I was switching stations from an overtime, and somebody saw it and was like, husband, boyfriend? I'm like, no, it's me. Like, I do this job. I've had that happen with my license plates too because I have the fire plates.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, you kind of get used to it. I've gotten to the point where like I can laugh it off and they're like, oh really, you do that? That's really cool. And then imposter syndrome is something that I've dealt with my whole time in the fire service. Mm-hmm. And I think it's pretty common to the point now where me and then our like in-house clinician have rebuilt the academy resiliency training. So when people go through our academy, they have a day where they do resiliency and we talk about mental health and coping and all the things that you might need for the academy. And then coming online, and imposter syndrome is one of the sections that we do that's near and dear to my heart because I think it hits all of us, especially in the fire service where it's super physical and the stakes are really high and the pressure is really high. And then also as a new paramedic trying to figure out how to apply book things to the real world and like, can I actually do this? I definitely have those thoughts, but I'm also really fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of great friends and coworkers who are really good at like talking me off the ledge when I need it. And reminding me that like, no, you can do this, you do deserve to be here, and I'm really grateful for that.
Okay, last question. For any young girls or anyone who's watching, what would you say if you had a message of encouragement for them?
I feel like for me, it sounds kind of cheesy, but like follow your passions, like whatever you want to do, even if you look at the career and it's very male dominated, there's not a lot of women that do it. that doesn't mean that you can't. And if I can do it, anybody can do it.
I love that.
Yeah, I totally feel the same way. It's really a matter of not giving up and not letting what anyone says deter you from doing what you want to do. If you can find a support system, if it wasn't for the people that helped me get here, all my mentors, I'm sure like having the support, especially when it comes to like imposter syndrome that we talked about earlier, it makes a huge difference because you need that reminder sometimes, you know? Not that you couldn't have done it on your own, but it doesn't hurt to have the extra help and, you know, other women supporting you and building you up makes such a big difference. Yeah.
I would say if you want to do something, there's always a way. You might have to get a little bit creative and you might have to think outside the box, but there's always a way to do something. And that was, for me, coming into this field is figuring out like, okay, this other way might not work, but I'm going to figure it out because I really want to do this job. There's always a way if you're really passionate about it, and it is so worth it. Like it is so worth it.
Yep.
Women are awesome.
Yeah.
Y'all are awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think it's really important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, if you're watching this and are curious about any of these fields, we discussed some programs and initiatives that are helping broaden women's participation in each of these industries. You can find that in our full conversation on 9news.com. And around the country, women's sports are finally starting to get the attention they deserve. Here in Colorado, there are plans to build a brand new 14,500-seat stadium for Denver's new National Women's Soccer League team. It'll be built on a vacant site at I-25 and Santa Fe Drive, just south of downtown. It's expected to open in the spring of 2028. Denver will also have a professional women's rugby team soon. We're one of 6 cities chosen to host a team for the inaugural season of the new Women's Elite Rugby League. The other teams are in Boston, the Bay Area, Chicago, New York City, and Minneapolis-St. Paul. The Denver Onyx will play their first ever match on March 29th at Infinity Park in Glendale. And earlier this month, the Colorado Avalanche hosted their annual Girls Hockey Night. The event featured young girls as refs and PA announcers, youth girls teams playing at intermission, and an opportunity for kids to learn the basics of the sport. According to USA Hockey, the number of girls registering for hockey teams has increased by 39% over the last decade, compared to just a 4% increase for boys. But it's not just sports participation numbers that are growing. A lot more people are watching and investing in women's sports, especially basketball and soccer. Nearly 19 million people watched the finals of the 2024 Women's NCAA tournament, according to Nielsen ratings, and that was up 89% from the year before, and was the first time ever that more people watched the women's final than the men's final. The 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup was the most viewed women's sports event in history, with nearly 2 billion people around the world watching, according to UN Women. And revenue from women's sports exceeded $1 billion for the first time last year. It actually reached a whopping $1.8 billion, according to Deloitte Research. That's a 240% increase in only 4 years. Now, this boom in women's sports is amazing, but the level of representation and public interest we see today is certainly not what we've always seen in years past. I had a conversation with 9 News sports journalist Ashley Moore, who happens to be the only woman in the 9 News sports department, to discuss the past, present, and future of women's sports. All right, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you. So obviously the advancements and the state of women's sports right now is not always how it's always been, right? Tell us a little bit about what barriers women athletes faced in the past.
I mean, you see the growth of certain sports now, the National Women's Soccer League, the WNBA #1.
Right.
I remember being a fan of the WNBA and people would be like, why are you watching that? Nobody watches women's sports.
Of
and
course.
then you have that conversation about how women's players should make more like the WNBA, and the response was always, well, nobody watches the WNBA. And I'm like, but people do watch the WNBA. It's the fact that you have to give us the same platforms as other people. So I was watching the WNBA back in a time where you had to watch certain channels, the middle of the day in the summer.
Right, you had to really look for it.
Right, you had to really look for the game. Yes,
Right.
yes, you did. And, you know, a lot of people were watching, but you had to work to watch. Now ESPN has picked up the WNBA, TNT has picked up the WNBA, and now people are actually watching because it's so accessible. Now they're like, oh, let's give you billions of dollars in TV rights and TV deals. And now everybody's like, oh, the WNBA has gotten better, and it's like it hasn't gotten better. It's just
been good.
Right. It's just that
been
more
great.
people are watching, and I think that's the biggest thing happening today, because the WNBA is only 28 years old.
Right.
Lisa Leslie, first girl to dunk in a basketball game. Now we're seeing it on the college level, professional. But it's always been this good. We're
Right.
just now getting the recognition that we deserve and that the women deserve who have been on that stage. But I mean, women's sports have always been good. A little bit
Absolutely.
better than the men.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And I think as a sports journalist, I'm curious to hear your take on this. Do you think that media coverage of women's sports has influenced public perception, participation, investments in women's sports?
I do and I don't. I'm on the
Okay,
fence
okay,
there
okay.
because I believe if the media had gotten onto women's sports earlier, we would be further along. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
it's been the players, the athletes who have been the Trailblazers, athletes who have been working, breaking records, making sure their recognitions are on the national stage, although the game may not have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now everybody's starting to grab onto women's sports. At the National Women's Soccer League Denver announcement, every station was there.
Oh, yeah.
And you love to see it, but had every station been pushing for, a Denver team, say 10 years ago, 15
Right.
years ago,
Right.
it would be bigger than what it is now. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
of
But I think the
course.
media, we report what's popping, what's trending.
Yeah.
And, let's be honest, lately, for some reason, everybody wants to watch, but now we're starting to report on what's trending. But I think we could have done a better job of that 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 28 years ago when the WNBA started, But we're starting to adapt, and I
Yeah.
love that,
Totally agree. What are some of the biggest strides that we've made to date, and what do you expect? What are you optimistic about moving forward into the future?
Strides made to date. I mean, the women's national soccer team. You like soccer.
I do. Mostly when it's Colombian soccer. Of course, but I do, yes.
But you know how dominant those women have been for the last few decades.
Oh, yeah.
More dominant than the men.
Huge. They're so good.
And a couple of years ago is when it was, the women don't make more than the men, but they make it further than the men in the World Cup every year. You know what I mean?
Make it make sense.
Right.
Right.
So now sponsorships are starting to be paid to women more money. The leagues are starting to give the women more money. The national team is starting to give the women more money. Those are strides we've made. In the WNBA, the CBA agreement is coming up, and that is what determines how much they make. It went viral that Caitlin Clark was only making $75,000 for her rookie contract.
Yeah.
Well, that's about to change. They're about to make more money, but then years from now, they'll likely make more money. You know what I mean?
Right.
But one of the biggest things here locally is that Denver National Women's Soccer League investment, the stadium that they are building for those women.
It looks insane.
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 Better than the Rapid Stadium, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Totally agree. Hands down.
That's where we start.
Yeah.
We make these investments. They pay twice as much as any other team has ever paid for a National Women's Soccer League team. Okay.
Wow.
You make that investment, then you build around the stadium. You build a beautiful stadium, but you build around the stadium so that people want to be there. So that entertainment district that they're planning there. The right people are making the right moves, and that's how we continue to advance the game. Make the stadiums as beautiful as the men, and people will want to show up. They'll want to be there.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that people keep watching because women's sports has always been good. It's getting better. More people are kind of waking up. So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Ashley,
course,
and
of course.
sharing your expertise.
Oh,
We
no
love it.
problem at all.
Now, the self-proclaimed Swamp Princess is gaining a new crown this year. Doechii has taken Billboard's top spot for 2025 Woman of the Year. In 2023, she won Billboard's Rising Star Award, and now she's the third woman to progress from that award to Woman of the Year. In a statement, Billboard's editorial director said, quote, "With her genre-blending sound, Doechii is redefining what it means to be a trailblazer in the music industry." Billboard's Women in Music Awards on March 29th will also honor other female artists like Gracie Abrams, Glorilla, and Tyla. All right, I love women, I'm nosy, and I love accosting people. So in honor of Women's History Month, I went out and about to disrupt people's days and ask them about the women who inspire them in their lives. It was real sweet. Take a look.
Well, I think every day should be Women's History Month. Every month should be Women's History Month. I really want to do a shout out to Marsha P. Johnson, one of the incredible, brave individuals who was able to stand up to the police during the Stonewall riots in New York City and really launched the whole equal rights movement. And we've been beneficiaries of that, and I'm really grateful.
I'd like to shout out to my Colorado Wildfire Senior Women's Softball Club. We are women from age 50 all the way up into the 90s, and I am so inspired by the older women who did not have the opportunities to play sports like I did.
Well, I hate to be so cliche and unoriginal, but I have to say that number one is my mom. She had a big heart. She literally would give you the clothes off her back. And so I'd have to say that she was my number one inspiration.
The first person that comes to mind is my supervisor. I'm a mental health therapist, and so being a couples therapist right now, times are challenging for a lot of people, and my supervisor's there for me all the time to guide me through a lot of tough issues and helping people every day.
Yeah, I'm actually really inspired by my daughter. She's the executive director of an organization on the U.S.-Mexico border. She does humanitarian work and advocacy for migrants. And I'm just really proud of her work. She makes me a better person, actually.
So I think about my mom, who, as I was growing up, she raised me and my brother and sister, and was an inspiration to us as a mom, but then went back to school to become a teacher. One of the things that I recently saw as I walked into my daughter's room, she's a 10-year-old girl, and she was teaching stuffy school to her stuffies, and she was reading them a book about rebel women who make a difference in the world. And I was just really proud to have my own daughter like reading to her stuffies and teaching them, sort of like my mom was a teacher, teaching about strong women who have made our world a better place.
How adorable! Okay, let's hop into this week's shoutouts, where we highlight people who have positively impacted their communities. Now, mariachi groups are usually made up of men, but one group of women in Colorado are pushing the boundaries of this music style. Las Dalias is one of the few all-women mariachi groups made up of skilled musicians with years of experience. As the women told 9 News photojournalist Ann Herbst, it's a group that builds each other up while breaking barriers. You can find Ann's full story about Las Dalias on 9news.com. And auto repair shops aren't well known for being a space centered around women, but a group of mechanics in Sheridan are working to change that. CC Hogg opened the Good Judy Garage just over 3 years ago with the goal of offering the community a shop that does good work in a safe and welcoming environment. Now CC has a shop full of skilled women and non-binary mechanics carrying out that mission every day. And finally, a well-traveled trail that connects Denver to Durango exists thanks to the work of one woman. Goody Gaskill is responsible for helping create the Colorado Trail. She was an avid hiker, painter, outdoors enthusiast, and someone whose energy drew in people around her. Gaskill first got behind the idea of creating a route through the Rockies back in the 70s. She passed away in 2016, but her memory lives on in every mile of the trail. Thank you so much for joining this week's Culture Report. We'll be back to continue the conversation right here on 9 News Plus and on 9news.com.